The news at 2 and there's no boing. It's just.
Good afternoon, members. Unfortunately, the chair and the deputy chair have both given their apologies this afternoon. So I will start the meeting and ask for nominations for chair for the meeting today. Okay, nominations.
Yes, Councillor Green nominator.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
Second.
Thank you. I think everybody has given their attention to the meeting. So Councillor Quinlan has been elected as chair of this meeting. Thank you.
Now we can go straight to our agenda. Item 1, notice of recording and webcast. A reminder to all members that this meeting is being live streamed on the internet for live and subsequent broadcast. So please, can we keep this in mind when speaking? The press and public can record and take photos if they wish to. Item 2, apologies. Are there any apologies?
Apologies from Councillor Ahmed, Councillor B and Councillor Jenkins.
Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Can all members declare any interest now or before any relevant item, please? Item 4, action notes and action tracker. Are the action notes of the last meeting agreed? The action tracker is for noting, and Jane will progress the outstanding actions. Yeah, agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 5, financial monitoring, 2022-23, month 5. I'd like to welcome Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources, Councillor Yvonne Mosquito, and we have finance officers in attendance online for this item. Could you please introduce yourselves?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My name's Lisa Taylor. I'm the Interim Assistant Director of Financial Performance and Insights. And this afternoon, I'm going to take you through the month 5 financial monitoring report. Could I just share a couple of slides with the committee, please? You see those?
Yes, we can see them.
Thank you. So this afternoon, we're bringing the month 5 in-year financial monitoring report, which we do every month, to this committee. We're also presenting this to Cabinet next week. What we've agreed, and you'll see on the second slide now, is that we are changing our approach to financial monitoring. So due to the current economic crisis, we are bringing financial monitoring reports every month to Cabinet now, as well as Scrutiny Committee. So this month, Scrutiny Committee just comes a couple of days before Cabinet. In the future, Cabinet will be first and this committee will follow. It's just to do with the timetable. So I'll take you through the financial position for month 5. You'll remember I came to you at month 4 a few weeks ago. So we still have the aim to deliver a balanced revenue budget by the end of this financial year. So we need to mitigate some risks. As I said just now, we're still in a difficult time. We've got the national picture of rising inflation, economic shock. So things are changing very, very rapidly. We've also got the cost of living crisis that's been declared as an emergency by the council. And in a minute, I'll come on to what this report says about that. I'd also like to just remind you that we do have strong reserves and balances as an organisation, which we can draw upon if we need to, but obviously you can only spend those once. So it is important that we try and mitigate as many costs and overspends as we possibly can, rather than drawing on those. We have a level of borrowing for our capital programme. We are reducing that, but the cost of borrowing, as you'll be aware from the national press, is actually increasing. So we need to make sure that we don't have the cost of borrowing increasing too much. We're continuing to focus on value for money and medium-term transformation. So we want to make sure we continue to deliver best-in-class services. We're slightly different to some councils. We have a rolling budget process, which means that we regularly review our MTFP, which is our medium-term financial plan. So we can then identify risks and put mitigations in quickly. And next week's Cabinet report, Cabinet agenda has a report, which is the mid-year update on the medium-term financial plan for you. You'll remember that when we set the budget in February, we still had challenges for the years ahead, which was a £33 million gap in next year. That gap has been reviewed in that report you'll see next week, but we're continuing to work on closing that. And the government has decided not to have a spending review. So actually that puts potential pressure on us as there could be less funding available. We're keeping a close eye on all of this. So month 5, I've already mentioned that because of the economic situation, we're going to come to both Cabinet and Scrutiny Committee every single month rather than just quarterly to Cabinet. So it's continuing to deliver a balanced budget. This is a high level report with risks, and we also have some mitigating factors in there. I'd like to just draw your attention to capital. So we have a big capital programme. If there is a risk to delivery, sometimes there is due to programmes changing, delays in maybe materials or other items needed on site, we will not lose funding. We can slip funding for capital from one year to the other. No major issues to identify around the housing revenue account, the dedicated schools grant or treasury management. And again, from the national press, you'll be aware of interest rate volatility at the moment, and we're continuing to carefully match and watch that. And where we've got things that are funded from grants, we're assuming that we will only spend up to that level of grant, so we won't be spending more than the grant monies that are available to us. Quickly, some changes since month 4. So this is an important change in this report. So Cabinet next week are actually asked to approve funding of £5 million for the cost of living emergency crisis that has been announced. And we will fund that from our financial resilience reserve, which is monies that we've set aside in a reserve for managing risks and managing pressures. We're also keeping a close eye on gas and electricity because costs are rising there. We've got borrowing, not very much change. There's a little change there from month 4 to month 5, but we've got no foreseen risks for the remainder of the year. Treasury investments, again, a fall in Treasury investments, but again, they're still above our planned level of 40 million. So nothing bad to report there at this stage. And then the collection fund, there's been a slight change in some of the collection fund figures, but again, we are forecasting a deficit on the collection fund for the year, and any deficit will carry forward into the following year. I mentioned to you last time I came along, and you'll be aware from other presentations and reports you've seen, we still as a council have a number of risks, and this slide just at a high level talks to you about the risks. So in Children and Families Department, we've got CENAR, home to school transport and placement costs being risks to the budget. In adult social care, we've still got demand and inflation costs, so rising demand, rising inflation costs, potentially shortfalls in client contributions. City operations, parking income has still not yet returned to pre-pandemic levels, likewise with leisure management fees. And we've got inflation pressures in there as well, particularly around electricity and fuel. Housing demand is increasing and getting slightly worse due to the economic crisis. We talked last month about the pay award. So we budgeted when we set the budget in February for 2.5% pay award. The offer on the table at the moment is different. It's £1,925 per employee, regardless of their grade, which equates to about £14 million pressure against our budget, which again, we would fund from the Financial Resilience Reserve. I've already talked about general inflation, energy, particularly contracts, keeping a close eye on all of those. As you'll be aware, the budget, when we set it, had a number of savings targets to be delivered. We still have some savings that cross all departments of the council, and they've not yet been distributed to all directorates. And then one of the other areas that we're keeping a high and close eye on is around income collection. So again, due to the economic crisis, impacts on citizens and businesses may be that they are not able to pay bills to the council as quickly as maybe they would have done in the past. So what are we doing to try and manage and mitigate against these pressures? So we already had spending control panels implemented last year, and we've increased the rigour around those spending control panels. They look at workforce, they look at facilities management, and they're particularly looking at contracts and procurement. We're also continuing to review our reserves. Our policy contingency budget, which we set aside already, will be used to fund electricity. I've already mentioned the financial resilience reserve to fund the pay and inflation costs. Something else that's really important is the transformation programme. So as we transform, we change the way we do things. Hopefully we drive out savings. So we're trying to speed up some of that transformation programme. And we're also trying to learn from others, so benchmarking against others to see where they are providing maybe better, more cost-effective services than us, or where we can learn from them. And we're also trying to bring forward some of our opportunities for savings that are in the budget for future years, bring them forward so we can see the benefit of those quicker. And then my last slide just gives you a little bit more detail on those spending controls I mentioned. So they really are challenging. They're challenging spend. They're coming forward from last year, remaining in place. We've added an extra layer of governance this year of an overarching panel, which Becky Hellard will chair, to make sure that all three of those panels are delivering and are actually having the rigour and challenge that they need to. And as I say, there is that at the last point, rigour and control throughout those panels. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Lisa. And before I take I open up for questions, Lisa, could I now invite Councillor Mosquito to say a few words? And we also have got Mohammed Sajid from the department. So you can come and later. Councillor Mosquito.
Thank you. Well, Lisa has presented the report to you, Chair, and what I can say is that a lot of work is taking place to make sure that we have a balanced budget. I've written a letter to all the Cabinet members to ask them to work closely with their directors and the union to ensure that we manage that budget. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any questions? Councillor Tisley.
Thank you. It's general comments really, because Lisa's paid attention to the seminar problems, and this came up last week at Audit Committee, and there is a degree of correlation between the two, but it is underfunded. I know that there is an additional amount of money that's been given to SENA, but I am dealing with constituents that have still got problems and can't get placements, so there is an issue. And then home to school transport is still an issue again of underfunding. I know when I was deputy leader, I once looked at it and started to ask questions, and realistically nobody could give me answers as to how much it was costing, how much the overspend was, and it just seemed to me, I accept that we are getting to grips with it now. It's taken an awful long time, but we're still in a situation where the whole of the service hasn't settled down sufficiently for us to take our eye off the ball, as it were. It's still an issue. And then, as Lisa rightly said, the pay award at 2.5%. Now that may, with the added close on £2,000 that will be given to all staff, may sweeten the pill of a 2.5% salary increase for those who are at the bottom end of the salary scale. But I still think that it is going to be an enormous pressure on us. And that takes obviously onto energy. With the way things are going, and of course, we are not covered by the government's cap, so we're still at the vagaries of world prices. And the announcement yesterday by the OPEC +1, the one being nice Vlad the Mad, who they decided to take 2 million barrels of oil off the desk, and that inevitably is going to lead to price increases in 4 weeks, 6 weeks. We are still in a difficult situation. But the other thing is that, and it's a hobby horse of mine, and if colleagues on that side are sick and tired of listening to it, I apologise, but that is the collection rate. We budgeted for a non-collection rate of 3.15%, which in round terms is £18 million. I think it's going to be 5% plus, unfortunately, because of all the other issues that we know about: energy, mortgage, cost of living. Feed your kids, or it's going to be an impossible dilemma for many families in Birmingham. And I just think it's going to be well in excess of 5%. If it's in excess of 5%, that adds nearly £3.5–4 million to the non-collection. Now, if you then add that to the report, are under 9.2 of savings, and we've identified high-risk savings at £11.56 million. And so far this year, we've only saved of that £11.5 million, £0.8 million. And we're halfway through the year. So we've got an enormous task to undertake in bringing those additional savings through. I don't want to be the Jeremiah in the room, but I think I'd be failing in my role if I didn't point out some of the risks that there are. And, you know, the throwaway comment is always going to be that we take in round figures £400 million in council tax, and we're spending £130 million of that in interest payments. Really is sends a shiver down my spine, I must admit. Now, the other thing, and it's not in the report at all, and Mohammed will probably be able to tell us. I think Lobo was running at about £80 million, wasn't it?
71 million.
71.
It's a type of debt that many councils took out years ago, which was lender option, borrower option, which means that at the start of the contract you fix an interest rate, and then the lender has the option to raise that interest rate during the life of the contract or at a period of time. We then have the option as a borrower to repay all the money back and walk away, or we carry on. They've had a lot of bad press and councils getting out of those, and we are getting out of those as soon as possible. So we only have 71 million.
Right.
We're talking to one provider at the moment about potential exit. So we're always talking to our.
Okay. Well, that's helpful because I got it fixed in my mind that it wasn't. a couple of reports ago.
Yeah.
It's come down
Yeah,
to
we are.
71.
Yeah.
So we are trying to close on those options, which is good. I mean, in overall debt terms, it's a drop in the ocean. It's nothing, but it's something with increased interest charges. We've got to be mindful of it. If we can foreclose on the low situations, I think we're in a better position. Not a good position, but in a better position.
Thank you, Councillor Tisi. If you have finished, then I will invite Lisa to respond to the issues that you've raised.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just to make a couple of comments on those points, if I may. So absolutely, we recognise there are risks in those numbers, which is why we're now bringing reports to both Cabinet and scrutiny every month, and we're keeping a close eye on where things are increasing in cost. With regard to collection rates, we obviously will work with residents as closely as we can to support them, hence why we're setting up the cost of living crisis £5 million fund as a starter when we go to Cabinet next week. And then with regard to savings, quite often savings are slow to take off at the start of the year, and then we see them materialise as we go through the year. And you'll find last year a similar pattern happened. So we had less at the start of the year, and then they ramped up as the year went on, and we delivered more of those savings. We recognise all of this around children's SENAR, home to school transport. There has been a financial review taking place, particularly around home to school transport, and we'll make sure that that's built into the budget for next year, so we do have the right budgets for these services as we go forward. And then the pay award, I think, was the last point. We're just having to keep a close eye on that at the moment until it's finally agreed. And we'll obviously then finalise the figures in this report and finalise any drawdown we need to make from the Financial Resilience Reserve to fund that, and then make sure the budget for future years covers off those costs as well. I think that was all of the points you raised, Councillor.
Yes.
Are there any questions? Councillor Wood.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, just to I suppose dig a little bit deeper on one of the issues that the Councillor Tilsley brought up. There was a line in your presentation about savings not distributed to the directorate yet. I mean, does that mean the directors aren't aware of the savings that they're going to have to make? And again, we're 6 months away from the end of the financial year. We know through better experience that trying to mobilise savings of any great level with not a lot of time left, basically it's not going to happen. So that one, I'd like a little bit more detail on that. And the other comment, the other bullet point that shocked me a little bit, considering the circumstances we find ourselves in, was the return to vigorous control. I would have thought we should have vigorous control in all the time, not just now, because we happen to be hitting some hard times. And again, just to elaborate, I suppose, on something Councillor Tilsley brought up, is that with the non-collection, it is vitally important that we make sure that we have early intervention with those people that need support, and to make sure that we give support to those that most need it. And again, I'm a bit concerned that the speed at which we can mobilise that sort of support and make sure that it goes in the right direction. And the last one, and this is one of my bugbears, if you like, we keep using this phrase best in class. Nobody has actually told me what best in class is, and do we know anybody that is best in class so we can compare ourselves against it? So what is best in class? And if it's just a throwaway set of buzzwords, let's get rid of them. Let's just provide the best service that we possibly can. But best in class, in my opinion, is pie in the sky. It doesn't exist.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wood. Lisa, would you like to respond to the issues raised?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I'll go from the top, first question. So the savings distributed to departments. So we have a number of savings, for example, one around new ways of working, one around our corporate landlord, that need to be distributed out to services. And we've been speaking constantly with the departments about how we allocate those savings. That conversation is ongoing. So to answer your question, they are fully aware of those savings. They know they are to be distributed. They know they are coming to them, and work is underway to finalise that. So they should be allocated out very soon to those departments. I use the term return to rigorous controls. What I meant by that is we've actually stepped up those 3 spend control panels again. Budget managers are responsible throughout the year, all the time, for making sure they are spending their money wisely. They have rigorous controls in, but we've actually put that overarching panel, 3 panels back in, and then the umbrella panel I talked about that Becky will chair. So there should be rigorous control at all points. We've just made a bit more of a centralised, bringing it back together again so that we can drive it harder, faster. Completely agree with you around the non-collection. We need to be bringing early intervention and support in as quickly as we can, and there is an early intervention and prevention programme underway at the moment to support those people who need help, and we'll continue to do that with them. And then best in class, I'm not sure I can describe to you what best in class really means, but what we're trying to do is make sure that we deliver efficient, effective services that provide value for money. I talked about in one of the slides benchmarking to learn from others and what they're doing, but best in class can mean different things to different services and to different people. So it's all for us. It's about being able to use the money we have wisely, to demonstrate to our auditors that we are delivering services that are value for money, and that we are learning from others to make sure we are as best as we can be. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Could I invite Peter to explain best in class?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Councillor Wood, I agree it is a buzzword, but we have defined it, and I'll very happily share it with everybody in the committee. I think the most important thing about it is inspiring those managers and leaders to actually justify where they are, where they're going, and how they're going to get there, and why they think they are as good as they are or not, and then judging their plans to get to that best in class. Now, it is in the eye of the beholder, but in the definition that we've articulated, it's a couple of pages, and we've explored all the components of a service and what it might look like and all the things that people need to be thinking of. That is what a manager is required to justify in their own mind. And the challenge process that we're putting in place then is saying, well, how do you know? How you define it for the services and the customers you're serving, and then tell us how you're going to get it. So I know it can feel like a buzzword. It's easy, it's in the eye of the beholder, but we have put some rigour around it, and I'm very happy to share that definition.
As long as people know what the target is of what the levels that are expected. But even that becomes, as you say, it becomes in the eye of the beholder, because it becomes a level that we've accepted as being, well, it's better than we were, and this is where we want to get to. But does it make us best in class if we're not comparing ourselves with other people?
Well, if you're not comparing, you'll never know. And we're absolutely having that conversation with every service manager, every director. Well, prove to us you are, and therefore show through your comparison with others that you can do that. But of course, there's a reasonableness and a pragmatic requirement around that, because we could spend millions on some things, and actually that's not appropriate in line with the council's priority. So it is about making a judgment. The key thing is taking people through a process of questioning them very clearly about why they think they're good enough now. And actually, we don't want you to be good enough. We want you to be best in class. So that's how we sort of use it. And it's partly to inspire people to think more creatively about how they can deliver their services. But I very happily share that definition.
Thank you, Peter, for explaining that. I'm going to bring Fiona now before we round up this item.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to reference a conversation at Coordinating Scrutiny Committee that happened on the 23rd of September, where there was a presentation around the Council's response to the cost of living crisis. And one of the recommendations from that committee was that the Resources Committee actually continue and focus your work on the implications of cost of living crisis for the Council. Obviously, that's been referenced in the presentation this evening. I was going to bring it up, and I will bring it up under the work programme item later, but I just want to mention it now, so you've got a bit of time to think between now and the work programme item. Is there anything that's been discussed or highlighted in the meeting now that you would want to bring into the work programme and ask for more information or another report later on during the year? Yeah, so that was it, just to highlight it now, and I'll mention it again later.
Okay,
Just for the accuracy of the minutes, can I state that the outstanding loan was 71.1 million.
Thank you for that. Right, thank you, Lisa. Can we now agree, note this item? Note? Thank you. We're going to move on to item 6, update on implementation of Oracle. Moving on, we now have an update on Oracle from Peter Bishop, Director, Digital and Customer Services, and James Cooper, online, ERP Program Director, who is attendance online. Over to you, Peter and James. And again, members can ask their questions at the end of the presentation.
All right, thank you, Chair. I think
It's not okay because we have a different chair. Absolutely, I'm very relaxed, Chair. So I'm quite happy with your chair. So you carry on. Because normally what's supposed to happen, but it doesn't matter. You carry on, Sherry. I'm very, very, very.
Did you want to come?
No, I'm quite comfortable. I'm very relaxed. You can Peter. So.
Thanks, Peter. I just wanted to apologise on behalf of Becky Hellard, who would have been here. So just wanted to put that across. She is focusing on the budget at the moment, as you can imagine. So quite important. Shocker, yes. This is a regular update, and James Cooper, some of you will have already met before, and in the materials you've got an update on this, and I'm going to bring James in on this. But I just wanted to make just a couple of points, which I just think are probably important, and they're not to underwhelm the issues that we're experiencing, but just worth just contextualising it. We use the language of implementation of Oracle. Now, Oracle is a large American technology business, but what we're doing here is changing all of our business processes associated with HR, finance and payroll. We're sorting out 15 years of data. We are fixing some bugs which that we've found, and also in the stuff that we need to put technology in, so particularly things like interfaces. We're talking about how suppliers invoice. We're talking about backlogs of stuff. We might be I do not know how to do something, so we're having a lot of that. So, for example, we're finding that in schools, and what might be called user error, but not to necessarily underwhelm that either. So all of that is all in this implementation of Oracle. So I just wanted to be really clear with everybody that we're talking about a very complex, heavily invested in environment of business processes, of data, of technology over the last 15 years, which we are unwinding with this implementation of Oracle. And that's big, it's huge. We're having a lot of issues, as you know. We planned for some of those issues. We got more than we planned and risk mitigated, which is why we're in quite a difficult tail end of the implementation. And James will give us a bit of a deep dive on some of the issues and how we're dealing with them. But I just wanted to sort of put that context together, because This is no mean thing to have done, but we are having that deeper set of issues. We are coming out of it. We are getting it under control, but there's still some things to do. And I'll hand over to James, and I'm very happy to take questions at the end, as you said, Chair. And if James, if you could just very quickly bring up the report, and we can just quickly brief members on where we are, please.
Okay, Peter, I can't share my screen because of the way I'm connected via Teams, but the materials have been provided in the papers that were provided. So I'll walk through those and I'll indicate where I'm going from page to page so people can stay with me as I go through. So thank you, Chair. Thank you, Peter, for that introduction. I guess on slide 2 of the pack, you know, the reason for this pack is really to come together and to provide an update on what we have done since Oracle went live in April. I look at some of the risks and issues that continue to be managed under the program, and then a look at some of the remaining items that we have to address, and with some timelines around those items as well, that we need to fix before the end of this period of support, which is the end of December 2022. I've also included in the materials quite a low level of detail, which is around how we look at and track the activity that we've got ongoing by the individual streams that we've got. But for the purposes of this, I'm going to concentrate on the first 8 slides that we've got in the pack so that I can walk through those. So I think to pick up on a couple of points that Peter made in the introduction, this particular product is, and you as an organization are one of the largest local authorities in Europe, and we have basically replaced and taken out all of the core processes and data. I think that's the key thing to stress here. The data that you've had in this system over a significant period of time across a number of areas, HR, finance, payroll, etc. Going live with all of those in one go is always a risk, but it was a managed risk. It was one that we reviewed and refined ongoing, often with this committee as well, in terms of highlighting some of the risks that we had and how we were going to manage them. But I think to Peter's point, there has been a dip in some of the areas' performance after go live as we start to work through some of the issues that we've got. That is something that in an implementation of this scale and size is normal. I think that it is something where we always know that post a change of this complexity, there is a period of stabilization. I think the next point, though, that's made here is that I think this is slightly above what we had assessed originally. So the dip in terms of the things that we're working on is deeper and longer than we planned for. We had intended after 6 months to be in a position where we had washed through most of the substantive issues that we had, but I think that's going to take us a little while longer, and I'll work through the dates of what those will be specifically. So I just wanted to walk through, I guess, just a couple of the main functional areas of the things that we have done since we've gone live. We are consistently paying people. I know that we have had some noise from schools around some of the payments that have been made, not necessarily reflecting what they were done before. Some of those have been a combination of the schools getting used to providing us information in a different way than they have done before. And we've also been significantly firmer in terms of some of the payroll deadlines and the payroll timetables to schools that were in place before. I mean, as an example, previously schools were able to make changes right up to the day that the payroll was actually run. And that really does give us some significant issues that we have. And so we've had to ensure that schools are clear about what they need to do. As part of the go live, and again, I think as we articulated with the committee back in April, we have to stop doing certain things because we need to move the information that's in the old system to the new system. And that creates a backlog of items, and then we work through those items. I think we're starting to get some good traction in terms of making sure those are done, and we now track those on a regular basis. And we've now implemented a further level of automation to the way that we do that to help with new processing of payments to suppliers going forward. On slide 4, budget management. So we have had some delays in putting in the detailed capital and revenue budgets into Oracle. These are now in place, though, in terms of what we've got to do. And now what we're ensuring is that that data is accurate and coded correctly. And again, that's something that we would normally do anyway. There is then a proposal on the table about how we implement some more self-service to the budget holders. So helping them look into their numbers without necessarily the need for finance to crunch a spreadsheet for them or to provide them information manually. Schools, I think the next two bullet points speak to schools. And yes, as Peter alluded to, we did have initial issues with schools in HR where a number of the email addresses that were stored for them in the old system when they came across, they were incorrect. That's now been resolved. And we are already working with schools in terms of sharing how they can do more self-service themselves, so they can look at their own information and their own pay slips, for example, which again drives down the cost for the council in not having to print those and send them out, etc. On the finance side, I think we have asked the schools to use a new piece of technology by which they submit payment requests to the council for their own suppliers. And initially, I think there was a lack of understanding about some of that, despite providing the training. There certainly were some issues with the technology that we provided. That's now been resolved, and the schools are using that tool, and we have very few issues now with that. I think payroll in the school space still continues to be an area that we're looking into. The payroll accuracy number, the 98.8%, is not where we would want to be operationally. And I think schools make up a substantive part of the delta that we've got to change. And equally, in terms of financial reporting, that is also being worked on as a priority, because one of the key things is that the council has changed the way that it collects its numbers into its accounts, this thing called a chart of accounts. And in order for the schools to accept the information from the council, they need to be able to accept it in a way that they can consume it. And we've developed a specific solution for them to do that. And we're working with the schools at implementing that now. And I think the last point really is around the allocation of income, and just to make sure that we have the allocation of debt across the council in accounts receivable correct. And I think that's one of the largest areas that we've had particular issues, is making sure that customer accounts reflect the amount that they've actually paid the council correctly. So that is now reflected, I think, in the next page, on page 5, which is around our current risks and issues. And the one I spoke about last around the allocation of income is this area that we call accounts receivable. So this is the monies that we receive in, and how we then process that, and then how we then chase the debt on the back of that. And we have had some issues in this area. It is one of the parts of the solution which is the most tailored towards Birmingham in terms of what we've got. And we are currently planning that by the end of this month, this area will then be complete and the issues will be resolved. The next bit, sorry, is a bit of technical gobbledygook. I'm often told off for my acronyms. ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning. PaaS is Platform as a Service. These are the things that we do that are uniquely Birmingham. So these are the items where Birmingham has asked that we can adapt the solution because of the unique nature of your business. And that is something that happens across other businesses, but has seen some changes. And a number of the issues that we get at the moment are in this space. We still have some gaps in our support organisation, and they are being filled. We're looking at how we can do that with both interims and also using other suppliers that we have already worked with. And that then feeds into what we call ServiceNow tickets, which are the way that people log issues with us. And that volume is now coming down. So we are seeing the number of calls from end users for help is starting to reduce as well. The volume of change requests has always been an issue for this program, and this is where people have asked us to do things in a different way and to change things, and that continues to be fairly high in terms of what we've got. We are being much more prescriptive in terms of the business case that's coming for those change requests to make sure that they have the right thing. And also with something of this scale, everybody wants to have their favorite report again, and from our perspective, we tried to be as out of the box as we can possibly be in terms of the reports that we have provided to people, but there are still some bottlenecks in terms of getting reports into people's hands to enable them to get the information out of the system. On page 6, this now just maps out, I guess, those particular issues. And I apologize for some of the technical jargon that's in this bit, but it really maps out. And I think the underlying thread here is that we know where the issues are in terms of the Oracle platform, and we now have a plan in place, and we have had a plan in place for the resources and how they will be applied to actually fix these. And in terms of the finance space, that looks primarily at accounts receivable. We are looking at the end of October when the substantive issues that we still have outstanding will be resolved, and then some tail end into November around looking at the reporting side. In the procurement space, that piece is looking at, again, at the end of October. We will then start to return that back to the organisation and take it out of the programme and go back into a more business as usual support world in terms of what we're doing. And on slide 7, we are going to continue as a programme to support payroll. So we have resources in place. They are primarily focused on when the payroll is run, to ensure that we don't have any particular issues with that. And also it's primarily focused on how we look back at new starters who need to have backdated pay and how we address that. And there are some reports. And then finally, in the HR space, we have a couple of statutory reports that we have to provide, one by the end of October and one by the end of November that relate to schools and to social workers. And one small component left to do around how we progress and pay awards for staff in the payroll system. I think the last slide here, I guess slide 8, then just really summarizes the continuing work of the programme over and above the existing support organisations that are placed in the council. So we will be doing some more user adoption. That's how people use the system and communications, but we'll be doing that in a different way. So looking at more of the corporate staff who can help us with that. The HR area, because it's fundamentally stable in terms of the core HR provision that's done, will return back to the leadership of the AD within HR and that transition is happening now in terms of what we've got to do. Payroll, we spoke, will remain under the guidance of the programme, as will finance. Procurement, again, because the majority of items within procurement, the accounts payable space, are not system related at this moment in time. We will continue to look at some of what we call sourcing, how we work with suppliers. We'll keep that. And the system administration will remain within IT&D as it's led. And we will keep a rump of technical people to work on any other tickets that come up and that are raised by end users. So I think from our perspective as a programme, we know that we have particular issues that we have left to fix. We know what they are. We now have the resources applied to fix those particular issues, but we're aware that it is still creating noise, particularly amongst schools, for example, where they would like us to go faster to fix the things that particularly relate to them, and also to ensure that any payments that we make through the system that go to suppliers, for example, are done and are processed in the most efficient way. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to pause there for questions.
Right. Thank you for this update. Are there any questions? Councillor Wood and then Councillor Casey.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I can't help having a bit of a feeling of deja vu, really, because I think we had exactly the same problems when we implemented the last system 12 years ago. The one that obviously there's a figure in here that there's 7,000 invoices awaiting checking and payments to suppliers. Now, obviously, yeah, I understand that there are issues there. I wouldn't mind knowing what the value is of that 7,000 invoices are, because I bet you it's not £2.50 or anything like that. And the rising costs affect everybody, not just individual residents, but companies as well. So it's very likely that we are seriously affecting their cash flow. So yeah, I'd like to know what sort of values on that. I can see that it's obviously come down from 13,000 to 7,000, but that's still a very, very high number. And I dare say, if the members of this committee were aware of what the value of those 7,000 invoices totals, I think you'd be horrified. So I think, yeah, we need to concentrate on that. Speaking from my personal experience, I've had contact from a couple of my residents that are on the receipt of housing benefit. Some of these payments have been not too far out of date or out of kilter, but 2 or 3 days out. But it's 2 or 3 days that's enough to get them on the phone to me saying, I haven't been paid. So, you know, there's quite a few things that are being affected on this, and obviously the payments are the big one. But I would like to know the value of those 7,000 invoices, because I think it's only then that people will get a full idea of what the problem is.
Okay, Dennis.
Okay, so I think deja vu, I don't know, because I wasn't here 15 years ago in terms of the deja vu. I think some of the issues that we're facing are typical of an ERP of that, you know, particular type of system of this scale and this nature. So I would tend to agree with you. I think for a platform that's 15 years old, the data is going to be a little bit stale, perhaps, and so we have had issues with that. I think of the 7,000, if you'd allow me the good grace to go away and come back to you with the number, the value, I can certainly do that for you. That's not a problem. I think what I would say is that with regard to the point around hardship and impacts on businesses, what we have been doing in terms of processing the numbers is looking very hard at how we categorize that, because we're aware that many of the organizations that are caught up in this payments backlog are small and medium enterprises in Birmingham. You know, they're not necessarily global conglomerates that can sustain some of it. And we do know that a good number of these payments as well are very small values. You know, when I say small values, I mean below £1,000, but that's not to detract from the fact that they're still an important payment to individuals as well. So again, I can provide a breakdown of what those values are in terms of those things, but we have taken an approach whereby we have tried to prioritize payments to ensure that the impact on businesses is not as you've described. On the housing benefits one, and we process roughly around about £11 million of housing benefits and various other payments at any one time through the system, typically on a weekly and monthly basis. So, you know, I'll apologize if we have not paid a particular resident on time within 2 or 3 days. We do have some issues whereby the details provided to us to make the payment can sometimes be out of date. And in that case, if we are contacted, we have a very quick way of making what we call one-time payments very quickly, and they are paid immediately to the impacted person and or the impacted business. So we have both a mechanism for addressing that if we need to, but we also do check the payments that go through the Oracle platform. They're often fed from external systems to make sure that we don't have any errors, but we do from time to time miss some.
Thank you for that response. Councillor Thistle.
Just a point that just been.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just to add the point, if there are any businesses or residents that do come to you and are in hardship, just do let me know, or Becky, or any of the leadership team, and we will focus on that. The categorisation that James was talking about is getting the grip of the sort of size and dimension. There is a lot of a tail, very small numbers, and I think, James, we're automating a lot of that, so there are sort of straight payments if they're low value, so they just go straight through. So there's some improvements we want to do there. So we get about 4,000 invoices a week, if I remember rightly. So that's, you can imagine, we've got to try and manage that, just normally fix the stuff that the program inherited right from the day of go live, because we had to hold back on some payments to start with, otherwise we'd have never migrated the data. So we've got BAU, we've got a backlog that we've inherited, effectively the teams have then got to pick up, and then we've got some automation and some issues. So you can sort of see a bit of a complex cocktail of things to sort out, but we are getting the grip of it. It is going down, and it continues to go down to what you might call our normal level.
Thank you for this update. Can we now note the update? Thank you. We're gonna move on now to item 7. Progress report on implementation, procurement governance arrangement. The next item is to track the recommendations from the task and finish group on procurement governance arrangements. The report, which was presented to committee in March, has been circulated to members, particularly for those of us who are new to the committee this year. Steve Sandercock, Assistant Director for Procurement, and Claire Lewis, Assistant Manager, Policy and Governance, are in attendance online. So Steve will take us through the progress report, and then members will have the opportunity to ask questions. As a committee, we need to agree whether we are satisfied with the progress made, whether further information or further reports back to the committee are required, and what the timescales should be. Would Councillor Mosquito like to introduce the item and then hand over to Steve?
Thank you very much,
Councillor
Chair.
Mosquito.
Thank you very much. Well, Chair, I know that a lot of work has gone on this in this particular area, and by your predecessor or the predecessor of the current chair, and Councillor Mohammed Akhlaq. And I know that officers has worked, because procurement has long been a big issue for us as councils. It's gone on for years and years and years. We've always talked about how do we include local suppliers, local businesses. And certainly when I came into post, that's the first thing I discussed with Steve. And so we're working on that. Now, this is a report around the processes and the progress that's been made to date. So I now hand over chair to Steve to talk about those, the work undertaken.
Thank you. Steve, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Mosquito. Chair, great introduction to the report. Appreciate the introduction around that and the context that you've set there. And I think from a point of reflection for me, for those members that that were on the task and finish group, it was around about this time last year that we held our first task and finish session. I think there were 4 in total from between the month of October, culminating in the final report in March of earlier this year. And that looked to undertake that fundamental review of our existing procurement and governance arrangements, as they were then called. And the outcome were 22 recommendations that then fed into the updated what we're now terming our procurement and contract governance rules. So we've updated those rules. Those rules were then adopted by full council on I think it was the 12th of July earlier this year, and then there were some further minor amends in line with the recommendations of that report that sort of made minor adjustments to the actual rules themselves, but also then formalised, signed off the new procedural aspects around waivers to the rules. So that's the formal process that, if you like, enables exemptions to following the process as strictly laid out, and also the breach procedure as well. So in the circumstances where, for example, the rules have not been followed in line with the governance as laid out, that may then require an investigation around whether there's a breach to the rules has occurred. So clearly, in that particular case, we seek and we strive for assurance that the rules are followed in all cases, but there will be occasions where that won't occur. And what we were cognizant of under the old rules were that those breach arrangements, if those did occur, there was no sort of formal guidance or procedural aspect as to how those would be reported, things like that. So a lot of the work that's gone into the new rules is all about transparency and all about bringing out additionality of the data. So, for example, under the new rules, there's the quarterly report, which is now due from October. So that quarterly report will be provided to Cabinet in November, which will then highlight the number of waivers that have been signed off, the number of breaches that have been identified and clarified as a breach, the number of negotiated procedures where a direct award with a supplier has been undertaken, and that sort of level of information, which I don't think members will have seen previously. So I think that the changes that we've introduced will include that additional richness of information and clarity around the transparency as well. So the new rules have been promoted back into the business and with key managers, and there's also a range of training that's now been developed and will be rolled out for both managers, but also we're looking to do some member training around the new rules and members' roles within the overall procurement process as well. So that's to come, and I think some dates have been provisionally put into the diaries for the November time on that as well. So more information will follow on that. So I think that provides some context to the report itself. The report also, as I say, sets out the 22 recommendations that were adopted by the Task and Finish group of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. It then also provides a little bit of context as to what that recommendation detail was, and then the update as of September when the report was written. So I'll pause at that point. I wouldn't mind just sort of bringing Claire in to add a little bit more sort of detail behind that, and possibly Claire, the update around the member training in particular, because I know you've been working on that, and whether there's any sort of additional points which you feel are relevant before we allow members any opportunity to comment or question any of the points raised.
Hello all. So thank you for having me along. Thanks, Steve, for that. I think you covered everything pretty well from my point. In regards to the training that's being produced and rolled out at the moment, that will be looked to be completed by the end of November. We've gone out across the directorates within the council to ensure that we've captured all key stakeholders for invitation to workshops around the training. Invitations will be going out shortly for those workshops, and then the training will also be followed on by an e-learning programme that we're setting up as part of the mandatory e-learning for all new staff as well. So we're hoping to get everyone across the council covered, whether they're a part of procurement on a daily basis as part of their job roles or not. So yeah, I think without any further questions, that's it from me, and happy to answer any questions that arise.
Thank you, Claire. Members, are there any questions? Comments?
It's a general comment, if I may. As one of the unfortunate members that went through the process of looking at procurement and coming up with the recommendations, I accept that it is being implemented as we speak. However, from my vantage point, having spent so much time on it. And I think we've come up with a fairly liberal approach to procurement from the point of view that we recognised, or certainly I recognised, that we no longer had the resources to follow the previous procurement rules, which was one of the reasons for the new implementation, that I would feel that any deviation or breaches of the procurement policy should be reported to the scrutiny committee.
Right, thank you.
And no cover-ups.
Do you want to respond to that?
Steve can respond to
or
that.
Councillor Mosquito?
Steve, I asked Steve to respond to that.
Okay, Steve. Steve, over to you.
You're on mute, Steve.
Apologies, and it just noted that as well. Thank you. Yes, by all means, Councillor. I mean, we have the information, as you say. There will, I think, in the initial stages where we have moved, if you like, from one process to a new process, there are likely to be some, I suppose, legacy breaches, shall we say, which need to, you know, we do need to recognise that. The training will also help to make sure that the message and the consistency is then driven into the cultural aspects of the organisation. So, but certainly we've got the data. That data will be reported to Cabinet, and I mean, if as a recommendation, this committee would want to say see that data as well, and we bring those quarterly reports to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee around waivers, breaches, negotiated procedure, and you use that to you know, in your role as capacity of scrutiny. I'm more than happy to do that also.
Well, we spent the time on coming up with the with new procurement procedure, and I think that it's incumbent on you and the organisation to ensure that this scrutiny committee is advised of any breaches.
By all means, Councillor, more than happy to do that.
I would say that it was not a unanimous report, and therefore any deviation, and I'm trying to be as diplomatic as possible, any deviation is playing into the hands of those members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee that did not support it. It's an own goal.
Yeah, note that, Councillor.
Oh, thank you for this report. If there are no other questions or comments.
To take a subject. It's a total statement.
Right. Subject to any reports coming back to this committee, I would like to know if members are agree to that. Are happy?
Delirious.
Okay, thank you. So can I thank you officers for your presentation. So we're gonna move on now to item 8. Planned procurement activities report. Oh, it's Steve again for this item, which, as you are all aware, is a standing item on the Resources O&S agenda. This month, the PPA report comes to us before being presented to Cabinet next week. And this is an opportunity for members to raise any issues on any particular procurement activities. Over to you, Steve.
Again, thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for introducing the report as you state. There are just scrolling to the right page on that. There are I think only 2 items as presented on the PPAR for this month, really. So again, I don't know if there are any individual questions. The PPAR process, just for context again, and this is part of the outcome from the new process now, is split into 2 reports. One is key decision reports. So those are where the project relates to spend over 500,000 or impacts more than two or more wards. And also then we have a PPAR report for non-key decisions. So that's below those levels, but over 177 value. My understanding is there are no key decision reports no key decisions on this one, but the ones that are presented are non-key decisions for this purpose of this meeting.
Right, thank you. Are there any questions or comments? If there aren't any, can we note this report? Agreed. Thank you. So we can now move on to item 9, and that is the work program. The next item is a work program, and Fiona will take us through it. Can members please indicate if they want to raise anything? Fiona.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, the battery of my laptop has gone, so I can't actually bring the document up on screen, but it is in your pack between pages 119 and 132. Which sets out the work programme that's been agreed with members for this committee. So this is your opportunity to review that, to consider any other issues that you want to request for future meetings. In particular, the next meeting is obviously Jane is working hard in between meetings and getting the reports requested and set up. So for the November meeting, there's the report on the implementation of the recommendations of the Council Owned Asset inquiry. And what I would highlight is that item, that inquiry was carried out. Thank you very much, Jane. That inquiry was instigated and carried out through the Economy and Skills Scrutiny Committee, but it now falls within the remit of this committee. So it was agreed at coordinating committee that the monitoring would happen through this committee, but members of the Economy and Skills Committee will be invited for that item to, because they've got the experience of the work that went into that report. So that will be coming to the next meeting as it stands. There's a financial monitoring report, the Plan Procurement Activity Report. The Cabinet Member for Social Justice will be coming to report on his Cabinet Member priorities to this meeting, and obviously the work programme. So in the first instance, I'd just like to confirm if members are happy with those items, whether there's anything that you want to add or consider around those.
Members, are you happy? Great.
Thank you. And then the point that I raised earlier that was agreed at the coordinating committee about the importance of the impact of the cost of living crisis, both for residents and businesses and for the council itself. If there's anything that you've heard in this meeting or anything that you would like to request to come to this meeting, to future meetings, to provide that assurance to you around that impact on the council budget and how it's being managed.
I think on that, it would be helpful. We've allocated £5 million. We've got no idea how this is going to be spent. We've heard that there's a possibility of support for council taxpayers. Perhaps it will be council housing account tenants as well. Sorry, man. Got stuck in the process. But also, I would hope that we are looking at supporting voluntary sector organisations that can actually reach some of the harder to reach families in Birmingham. And I'll fly a kite, and I've been flying this kite for a little time now. For me, the thought of children going to bed at night hungry is an anathema in one of the leading economies in the world. And I appreciate there are a lot of families, if you're on universal credit, you saw £20 taken out of your pocket a week. This inevitably is going to have some impact on families and their ability to feed children. I mentioned it before. I went into Asda last week or the week before. They've got a slow cooker for sale for £15, £16. If we can ensure that some of the harder to reach families are provided with slow cookers, you can cook for pennies a wholesome meal. And I mean for pennies compared with an oven. And people say, oh, well, it's too much time and everything else. I'll go back to the thought of children going to bed hungry, and we as a council need to ensure that we are reaching those hardest to reach families in our community and trying to provide them with the wherewithal so that hunger is a thing of the past. Sorry.
Can I bring Councillor Mosquito?
Thank you, Chair. Well, there is a report that will be going. I'm not certain if I think it's in the public agenda. Sorry, on the public website.
As the cabinet agenda, cabinet dates for the 8th for the 11th being published.
Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, good. So there is a paper going to cabinet on the 11th of October, and it's around the cost of living emergency programme. And within that, it touches on some of the things that you've raised, Councillor Tills, but I know that the council is working very hard at the moment, creating a strategy group. And someone who works in a voluntary sector told me this morning she was going to be joining a number of people on this strategy group. She'd been invited, so I thought that was really good because she was someone who's come from real grassroots organisations, and we have a tendency as a council to pick up the high and the big organisations. I won't call their names, and work with them, and then everything gets trickled down to the people who they claim are hard to reach. Well, that's not going to happen in this case. I heard a little bit about. I think they're calling it I heard Warm Hub, but it's called a warm. What's it called? A warm what?
Warm bank.
Warm bank. So it's called Warm Bank in Birmingham, but in other places they talked about a warm hub, and I thought that was a good idea in the circumstances. Yes, Councillor Tilsley, I am very concerned about what it's going to be like for those who are struggling, and certainly during the campaign it was just coming up time and time again. And one of the most frightening things is when I went knocking a door in a flat and a woman was burning wood inside the flat. This was in my ward, and I said, you can't do that, you could burn the flat down. I cannot afford, she said, the heating costs, and that was in May. And I know lots of pensioners are receiving their electricity bills. One went from £60 to £140. It's a real issue.
As well.
So I struggled. We had some discussions around food banks and food pantries, and I said, well, you've got people now living in minus. So if you've only got £51 a week to live on, and it's to do the travelling for the children, and it's to buy the food, and it's to buy clothes, and to pay for your gas and electricity, how are you going to find money for a food pantry? So whilst it's all right for those who are okay-ish, it's not for those who are living in minus. And I certainly remember, as a child, my parents said we weren't poor because we had food. We were not poor. And now I recognise many, many years, well, not that many years later, that I wasn't really poor because we did have food. And we are now in a place where people are genuinely struggling. But what I would say is, as councillors, we must say to people, put away their pride. Because some of our older people are extremely proud, and they will pretend that they're okay when they're not. And that's the reality of what's going on now. There are people who are pretending to be okay when they're not. And there's others who aren't ashamed. And I think they will go to the food, that's not a problem. But others genuinely are struggling. And of course, you've got individuals with mental health issues as well. So this is a real crisis. So when I saw the £5 million, I was pleased. And it won't go nowhere near what we need, but at least we're doing something as a council. But I think there are other things that we can do as well, aside from the 5 million. But I don't want to say too much because it's going to be the report to Cabinet Chair.
Thank you, Cabinet Member. Thank you for that. Well, if they just got, would you like to do that?
And just on the cost of living crisis, perhaps it's something that we'd work with the chair and see if there's anything that you might want to bring back to future meetings after that decision is made by Cabinet.
Yeah.
The other point that was raised from the report to Coordinated Committee on the 23rd of September under the item that looked at the Council's equality strategy, the Everybody's Battle, Everybody's Business. It was noted that there's an equality and inclusion dashboard that's being developed. And it was reported that's due to be published in February. It was recommended from the Coordinating Committee that might be something that this committee and your HR element of your terms of reference might want to look at. So I just wanted to put that to the committee this afternoon, if that's something you want to look at. And we can plan that in later in the year after February sometime.
Any views, Councillor? What are your views on this? You agree? Yeah, agree.
Thank you. Thank you. And then the one final point is there is quite a lot of cross-working between the different scrutiny committees because obviously the issues that members are interested in don't fall neatly within the remit in terms of reference of individual committees. So we have pulled together some information to share with members. For the other committees, it's been included in the work programme report, but because this is the first meeting in this cycle of October meetings, it isn't in the work programme report, but we will circulate that to you so you have that information for the other committees. But the only piece that's relevant for members of this committee is the item that I've already mentioned about the council-led active assets. So there will be members of the Economy and Skills Committee who will be invited to that item at the next meeting. Thank you.
Right. Okay, thank you, Fiona, for that explanation. So the next item 10, date and time of the next meeting. So the next meeting is on the 17th November at 2 p.m. Item 11, request for calling councillor call for action petitions. Are there any requests for calling? No. Thank you. Item 12, any other business? Is there any other urgent business? No. Thank you. Item 13, authority to chair and officers to act. Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Can I thank you all for attending this meeting? And the meeting has now ended.
Thank you, Chair.
Jerry? Yeah.
I'll discuss Michelle. Thank you.